Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome along to the September edition of the Landlord Lens. It's the collaboration between Property Tribes, of which I am the co-founder and also a full-time residential landlord, and the NRLA. And my partner in crime for this webinar is NRLA CEO Ben Beadle. And Ben, it's lovely to be back because there's so much going on in our sector. I know we always say this for every webinar, but it is true. And well, I don't know what you think, but it feels to me if another couple of nails have been banged into the buy-to-let coffin. And those are a couple of the subjects that we're going to talk about on this edition of the Landlord Lens. Certainly things causing landlords concern. But I thought a good place to start, Ben, was you have had the pleasure and the privilege of visiting Downing Street, number 10, and sitting down with the housing team there. Just be interested to know what are your takeaways from that.
I'm very privileged. It's the second or third time we've been in, and obviously it's really well timed thinking about all of the stuff that's been in the press recently. So the Prime Minister has his own kind of housing special advisor or advisors, and we went in to speak with them. I mean, the subject won't surprise folk, I don't think. This for us is about making sure the landlords have got confidence in the reforms that are coming down the track, which we still believe are coming down the track, despite the stories over the weekend. And I think, there are a number of things that we discussed. I don't think I'll be breaching confidence to share them with you. And if I am, I'm going to share them with you anyway. So the first one was just really around court reform. And making sure that the court service is ready to receive cases when Section 21 is abolished. Michael Gove has been very clear that will only happen, that Section 21 being abolished will coincide with courts being ready to receive cases. You read into that what you will. Not for me to say, but it's fair to say that we've got some PR going out tomorrow, where I have written to the Secretary of State for Justice about my concerns when it comes to not just how it will work and digitalization and that sort of stuff in the new world, but how it works at the moment in a world that's very straightforward. So we had a good discussion about that. Had a very good discussion about the property portal and the need for selective licensing to be abolished. Off the back of that, we don't want duplication, student tenancies, a few other bits and pieces, but principally all underpinned by supply or lack of and increased demand, and how government policy is fueling that or has fueled it through punishing taxation, unfair rhetoric, and all of that sort of jazz. And I was raising two specific issues because it was the first week of September, and you will recall, I think, that we had the announcement about childminding from the minister that's now no longer in that post, gone to energy. But that announcement, seemed to think that landlords were somehow harboring massive grudges against tenants with kids. I don't see it that way. And I was very annoyed because we had served up a lot of information from our mortgage partners 3MC that showed that actually landlords were acting upon restrictive terms issued by their mortgage providers as to why they wouldn't allow a business to be run from home. So that was the first thing that I got particularly narked about. And then the second thing was around right to rent and Robert Jenrick, seemingly thinking that landlords were harboring all of these illegal immigrants and ripping them off with poor quality accommodation. Well, I'm not sure how that fits into the Stop the Boats policy, but landlords ain't immigration officers, and they've been doing it for many years. And frankly, have a better policy rather than pigeonholing landlords as being somehow problematic. So I was furious at that, and let them know, because it's interesting. Gove has very much changed the way that he speaks when it comes to landlords. That doesn't mean that he loves us entirely, but he's far less divisive than he once was. That doesn't seem to have filtered across government, sadly.
Well, Ben, when you raise these points, do you feel that they are actually listening and going to act on them? Because, so often when there's a petition or another submission to government, they just seem to come back with these, I don't know, just headline, generic, tired responses. And you just always get the feel that they haven't really listened and taken the matter on board and really applied some serious critical thinking to it, which they do need to do, because as we know, our sector is in crisis. You said back in I think it was last November at the Conservative Party conference, that Rome is burning, and it still is. We're hearing that rents are going through the roof, and there doesn't seem to be any sign of that slowing down. Are they listening at government, Ben, or are they still doing their same old? Because I'm sorry, but I have little faith.
Well, look, it's a good position for us to be in, taking the arguments of members and concerns of members, to the top team. And we've had meetings with Gove and a number of other key politicians. At the end of the day, I can only convey the argument, and if they didn't want to listen, they wouldn't invite us in. They'd get on with it anyway. So I think they're certainly in listening mode. Whether they are in doing mode, we're approaching an even silly season in terms of the countdown to the election. And to be honest, I kind of put those two former policy announcements in that category. The right to rent and the childminding things were frankly a nonsense, that they wanted to pick a fight with landlords about. So look, I think they're listening. My job is to take credible arguments to people that matter. I hope that they will be taken on board when the minister replies to the select committee with a number of updates. That's what we're expecting in 2 or 3 weeks' time, probably just after the conference. But like you, Vanessa, we can't be too cynical about these things, but we also have to be realistic.
I understand. I do understand. Talking of Mr. Gove, you have a bit of a coup, I would say, because you've secured him as speaker at the national conference in November. So he's going into the lion's den.
Yeah, he will be, and I think this. I'm pleased. I'm pleased that he's coming, because it would be, well, he's not turned up yet. He said that he's coming, so let's hope that he still follows through with that. Look, we've been nurturing this relationship as members expect us to be, and conveying what I think are sensible and rational arguments on behalf of the responsible majority. He's written in the magazine. He knows that he needs landlords. That is the reality. Government needs landlords, and they need a thriving private rented sector. He said it himself. And so, yes, it is a coup to get the Secretary of State to attend or accept an invitation at this point. Again, I'm realistic, but I want him to hear firsthand from members, a firm but respectful way of some of the issues that they are encountering in the private rented sector. They will amplify the messages and the voice that we've been able to convey, that's for sure. But it's good that he gets it straight from the horse's mouth.
Absolutely. Well, I just wanted to say that the Q&As are open. We do welcome your interaction. This is a live webinar. We are not recordings. We are actually doing this live. We've got Mike Bull has put the first question in. He has a quick question about right to rent, Ben. He said, did Generic say anything in justification of their own policy of abandoning pretty much all of the safety measures currently in place for properties let to asylum seekers?
Yes,
You know,
I mean,
you've been a bit active in this area of what as well, haven't you?
yeah, we have, because actually, if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. If you're having a house in multiple occupancy, you can't just change the rules when it comes to safety standards just because it's easier to. As responsible landlords, we have to call out nonsense like that. I have to say, Mike, I haven't spoken with Generic. I've followed up in writing with him, and I await his observations. We're obviously in touch with his team, but I suspect Mr. Generic may not do the link, which is disappointing, because he was obviously a past housing secretary, and I worked with him during COVID with eviction bans and things like that. So yeah, it's disappointing to say the least.
Well, there's a lot of the confirmed government contractors like Mears and Serco, the two big names, who are desperate to get properties off landlords. I don't know if you're aware of this, Ben, but that they're going into a lot of landlord networks
Yeah,
and so on and so forth. And they clearly have budgets to offer guaranteed rents, etc., take a property off a landlord for 5 years. It does sound a very attractive proposition, but we've had a few incidents on property tribes where it didn't run smoothly. And my feeling is that when there is such high demand for rental homes at the moment, I think there was an article today in the media that said in London there's 38 applicants for every property. We should really be making the most of this environment where we have the choice of a very wide range of tenants, and we can do our due diligence on those tenants and find the best tenant that suits our property. So I don't think many of these schemes are particularly appealing if you look at it from that point of view. I wondered what your thoughts on that was.
yeah, you've probably been approached by the same people that we've been approached by, Vanessa, because I've had a number of conversations in past weeks around this type of accommodation. And I think if you step back, it's pretty nonsensical that, in the background, you've got all of these different cohorts and segments that are fighting over accommodation. You've got local authorities that are, competing with each other because they've flogged off their stock, got nothing left, and are promising, redecoration and incentives and this, that, and the other. Where actually, if you just tax landlords fairly, if you made the benefits and local housing allowance system easier to use, i.e., payment up front and no clawback, and those type, no 5-week wait and direct payment, actually you'd have people that were far more receptive, because our members tell us it isn't always about the money that you can get. It's about a lot of it is about the impact that costs have on you. And I was making this argument to Channel 5 News this morning, that actually, yes, rents are going up to record levels, but profits are also at record lows.
Mhm.
Landlords are not creaming it in. They are simply trying to cover their costs. And what costs are they? Well, mortgage costs, and the inability to offset mortgage interest in its entirety, which is a straightforward government policy. Chuck in frozen local housing allowance for the past 3 years, a sprinkling of overzealous regulation, and a smattering of anti-landlord rhetoric, and you've got a recipe for absolute disaster. So
Mm.
it'd be far better to have pro-growth policies
Mm.
rather than ridiculous incentive schemes that local government are fighting over. I mean, it's just bonkers.
Well, we've actually got a case on Property Tribes where somebody let to a local authority and the agreement came to an end and the landlord wanted their property back, and the local authority have said they have got nowhere to put the tenant, so they're not going to move them out. And this landlord has just been, left with a tenant that the local authority will not remove from the property as per their agreement. And I'm not sure what they can do in that case, but I think that's just quite a good illustration of how acute the crisis is, and it's going to get worse, I think. Particularly we've got another potential interest rate rise.
Yes.
SVR mortgages are going through the roof. I've spoken to somebody this week whose mortgage was £400 a month and they were achieving £850 a month rent, and now their mortgage is £1,700 a month, and they are very, very worried. And if you've got portfolio landlords, that could be multiplied by 10 or 20 properties. Our sector is really struggling. There's no doubt about it. Let's move on to our second topic, because as regular viewers will know, we try and look at the trending topics for landlords that are identified by the Property Tribes algorithm. We have a little silo on the front page called trending topics, and it measures how many people are looking, how many people are commenting, and so on. And then it sorts all of these topics every 3 hours, and literally before we come on air, Ben and I look at them and we choose which ones we want to feature on the Landlord Lens, which I think, Ben, it does make it very current. And the second topic we're going to talk about is this new guidance for damp and mold that has come out recently. And just ahead of that, there was a press release from the government announcing a fund to help tenants stay in their properties even if they are in rent arrears. So that's taxpayers' money being used to provide legal advice to tenants to stay in their properties even if they're in rent arrears. And Ben, this is what I was referring to earlier when I said 2 more nails being hammered into the buy-to-let coffin, because the damp and mold thing is just a follow-on really from previous legislation, and it is only guidance, isn't it? So it's not actual statute law. It is guidance, but nonetheless, definitely the balance has shift towards the landlord in terms of responsibility for damp and mold and ventilation in a rental property.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right, Vanessa. I mean, it is guidance, obviously. I take the view very much that whilst it is guidance and whilst it places an obligation on landlords to fix this stuff, it does also place a requirement on landlords to educate their tenants about how best to look after their property. And so, yeah, you are right. Ultimately, it's the landlord that carries the can on stuff like this. But if we dial back to what we saw with our Ishak, the little boy that died in social housing, this isn't a couple of spots on a bathroom ceiling that's occurred over time. This was pretty horrific, negligent mold, floor to ceiling, that simply the local authority abdicated its responsibility and hid behind the ridiculous complaints process. So I would stick my neck on the line and say, I don't think the private rented sector is as bad as that. And if there are examples, really the landlord should be getting that done and arguing the toss over it later. We all have experience of managing mold, and I know firsthand that lifestyle can impact it. The guidance makes clear that we can't just point the finger at that. So I think there's a role for sort of managing this sort of stuff. I had a flat that a guy was in for like 7 years, and I moved another lady in, and literally 2 weeks later, don't know what she was doing in there, oh my God, it's absolutely horrific mold. Well, we managed to kind of work through it with all of the usual stuff, and I put some extra ventilation in and that sort of stuff. So I understand the argument, around lifestyle, but when it is so on such an egregious scale as what we saw in that poor little boy's property, it has to just be fixed. But as far as the advice scheme is concerned, Vanessa, I don't think that this is quite the nail in the coffin that's put out there, because tenants can get advice from duty anyway when if they're being evicted and turn up to court. And I think that's absolutely right. If you're about to lose your home, whether you're an owner occupier or a renter, and whatever type of accommodation you happen to be in, there ought to be support for that, for those people. The issue that we see is that the advice happens kind of on the day at the moment. And so what that does, and what it will do in the new world, is it runs the risk of causing further delay. And actually, we'd much rather have tenants that are informed of their rights, because that, it's an obligation that must happen anyway. That's not a new thing. And we need to plug the legal advice deserts, which this scheme seeks to do, and seeks to do it much earlier in the process. Now, if as part of that, local authorities decide to use their discretionary housing payments to pay rent, which I think is the example that has been sort of quoted a few weeks or so ago, well, that might be a really effective way of keeping somebody in their home. Because as I've been at pains to point out in my numerous media appearances over the summer, tenants should be keeping up with their obligations. And I understand, that times are very tough at the moment, but tenants and landlords are between a rock and a hard place. Now, if local authorities are able to use discretionary housing payments to mitigate the risk of eviction, well, I'd rather they did that than told my tenant to stay put and wait for the bailiff. And so to me, that's a hands-on local authority. I'd prefer it didn't get to court. I'd prefer it got resolved at an earlier stage, but I put them in, a couple of different brackets. If we can keep people in their homes, that's great. I don't want people to make noise and not pay their rent. I want them to cough up, and I want them to behave themselves. Take those two things away. If the local authority can help renters on that journey, then that's good for everybody.
No, I understand. I agree with that for sure. It's interesting that in the press release, Mr. Gove said damp and mold isn't a lifestyle choice. Well, I do take some exception to that. A lot of it can be through lack of education of tenants of how to ventilate a property properly. Also, for instance, I had a case where an extractor fan stopped working in an ensuite bathroom that didn't have any window or any other form of ventilation, and the tenant didn't report it. So damp and mold started to develop there, and I wasn't even told about it. So there's so many grey areas around all of these headlines, and so many nuances that I just concerned that government doesn't fully understand the realities on a day-to-day basis. A couple of things that I was going to put forward with regards to the damp and mold issue was, first of all, I think it really highlights the need again for midterm property inspections.
Yeah,
you and I are very big fans of these anyway, but a really good way to find out if all is well as at a rental property is to undertake midterm property inspections, and they will pick up all sorts of issues that are in the early stages, such as damp and mold, or tenant's got an unauthorized pet, or the tenant is subletting, or the tenant is a hoarder. Those kind of things can be picked up via midterm property inspection. And the other thing, Ben, was to educate tenants. And I was thinking that maybe the NRLA could do a branded guide that landlords can issue to their tenants about how to avoid damp and mold and properly ventilate their rental home. What do you think of that?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely a good shout, because as we often say, Vanessa, prevention is very much better than cure,
Yeah,
right?
way less expensive as well.
100%. And to me, it would seem to be a very practical way of, appreciating the comments that the Secretary of State has made. Actually, all he's trying to do is to avoid another our ISHAT from happening. And I think, if we use that as the starting point, he's absolutely right on that. But there's stuff that we can do as responsible landlords, to as effectively as possible manage that situation. And it's funny, I was on LBC on Saturday or Sunday, and I forget what it was now, and the guy said, oh, well, you're a responsible landlord, there's there wouldn't be mold in your properties, there wouldn't be this, that and the other. I was thinking, oh crikey, I'm going to go and do my my inspections at the end of the month, and just make sure that definitely holds good. Because although there wasn't at the start, as you rightly observe, there are some things that take place that through education would be better not to, like drying of clothes and lack of ventilation and all of that sort of stuff. And as you know, I do a lot of student properties. Those are exactly the types of things that if you don't know, you don't know, right? And so practical property management is something that we can definitely do. So definitely an idea for the bank, that one.
Good. Well, we've got some good questions coming in. Dharmendra is saying that he does agree with our concerns about landlord mortgage payment increases. His current mortgage is £449 per month, and from the 1st of February next year, it will have gone up to £1,947 per month. That is a very significant increase indeed. And obviously it's impacting those people affected by Section 24 as well. Let's see. Dharmendra's actually also asking, does the NRLA have a partner who specializes in kind of mold improvement and ventilation? You do, don't you? Is it
We've got Glickstone that deals with things from a sort of a paint perspective, I'm pretty sure. But I don't recall that we have a dedicated kind of, anti-mold kind of doctor, albeit a number of them have been in touch these past couple of weeks. So I think actually, Vanessa, in the context of rental reform as well, that is also going to be quite important, because a few partners have contacted me around sort of noise and antisocial behaviour monitoring, and they do kind of damp and humidity as part of that. So we are talking to a couple of people at the moment.
Excellent. Well, Sarah Gilby has kindly pointed out that there's already a condensation fact sheet for tenants on the NRLA website, and she's given the link. So that is there. But I was kind of thinking more like a kind of branded booklet that the tenant could be emailed, they could download it and keep it. That was what I was thinking. There did used to be one of those a few years ago, which I always directed people to. It was kind of a generic one. I'm not sure if it's still there, but I think it's much needed now.
Yes.
Yes, thank you for that, Sarah.
She knows the website better than me, Vanessa.
I should have checked before as well. But yes, I think the education of tenants is very, very important there as well.
I agree.
Somebody's saying the chat's disabled. We're actually in the Q&A, which is the other place you can ask a question. Pavla's saying excellent idea about the damp and mold guide, and had the same problem, found out that tenants were trying to use the ensuite to dry wet bikes and wet bike clothing. And And yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of things that can cause this issue. And if it ever arises, the first thing to do is try and get to the bottom of what's causing it, because it could be tenant behavior. It could be something to do with the fabric of the building. So it's important to actually get to the bottom of it first.
When I was in property management, Vanessa, we had mold that we could not cure, and actually, in the end, we discovered it was a tiny, slow leak at the back of one of the wardrobe cupboards that had really sort of impacted the whole of the kitchen walls. And it required the whole thing to be kind of ripped out and started again. And so I think it's important that we don't default to tenant behaviour. We consider all of those things in our armory, our management of the property, our advice to renters and things like that. But also bear in mind it could be something we haven't even thought about in that way as well.
We need a damp and mold doctor. That's
Damp
for
doctor.
sure.
Dr. Damp.
Actually, on that note, there are two very popular companies with landlords that do positive ventilation input, and they are Envirovent and New Air. And I've spoken to both of them for Property Tribes TV, and they are experts in getting rid of damp and mold and condensation. So there is help out there, and just go and ask on the NRLA forum, or indeed Property Tribes, if you need any help or recommendation to be directed to such a company. Now, Ben, my next and third topic today was actually started by me.
Good.
Now, Ben, you've heard of BRRR. Buy, refurbish, refinance, rent out.
I have now, yes.
Yes. You've heard of BTS.
What's that?
Buy to sell.
Okay, yeah.
You've heard of R2RSA.
Oh God, what the hell was that?
Rent to rent serviced accommodation. Sorry, I'm being a little facetious here, as will become clear in a minute. Well, Ben, I'm very proud to say that I created a trending topic on Property Tribes with my new strategy, which is SUZY, Suzy. Shall I tell you what it stands for?
Yeah, go on. Puts out of our misery.
Sell up and see ya.
Sell up and see ya.
Now, okay, yeah, I'm joking. Okay, I had a bad day, as we all do. I had, strangely enough, a water leak in a flat that was 260 to repair. And I also had an alarm go off in a rental flat, and the tenant couldn't turn it off. They were working from home. It drove them mad, and an electrician had to be called out to disable the alarm. And that was another £130. So in one day, I was down £390. And I just love this no money down property investing that these property gurus talk about. I just wish it worked for me, but I can't seem to avoid the costs of repairs and maintenance and also. But joking aside, Ben, I had a down day. I made up my Suzy strategy, bit of a fun, and it was encouraging because so many landlords came on, and I said, give me reasons to stay in our sector. And so many landlords came on and pointed out all the great things about being involved in buy to let. And I just think it's a bit of fun to have these discussions, because, we do work in isolation as landlords, and it's so important to realize that there is a whole community out there that you can reach out to and, get some support from if you're having a bit of a wobble like I did.
No, I agree with that, Vanessa. It can feel like a very lonely place where, frankly, everybody's against you. Nobody likes you. You go to a dinner party, say you're a landlord, and I've given up going to dinner parties mainly because I don't get the invites now. But it's that sort of thing. It's we were talking about this with colleagues earlier, and some people feeling almost they don't want to raise the fact that they're a landlord. So I think creating that sort of environment, community that others can go to for support without judgment, I think has never been more important, for sure.
I'm so glad you said without judgment as well, because some people fear admitting that all is not well in their landlord world, as if it's some sign of weakness or something. I can absolutely 100% assure you that it's not. It's very courageous and brave to reach out for help if you're struggling. And that's one of the reasons my husband and I formed Property Tribes, is we couldn't bear to think of anybody sitting at home on their own, tossing and turning at night, not being able to sleep because they had a landlord or property investment problem. And one of my favorite sayings, Ben, is real problems can always be solved. It's only imagined ones that seem insurmountable. And with the breadth of knowledge within the NRLA community, and indeed the Property Tribes community, that there will be an answer out there. You've only got to ask. So I think, as you said, it's so important when landlords are in challenging times to actually reach out, and we can do so via all the social media channels. When you and I started as landlords, we didn't have access to these channels, did we?
Are we that old?
We are.
Oh God, that's depressing. God, might need to go on the forum and discuss my age. No, you are absolutely right. I think it is easier than ever to kind of get support, but it's also easier than ever to get some abuse back. And so entering into an environment that's a safe environment with other interested and like-minded people is definitely the way to go. And whether that is the Property Tribes forum, or whether it's phoning a friend, phoning the advice line, looking for landlord or property related solutions, there are solutions out there if you want to find them. And I think it's don't sit on it. That's for sure.
Indeed. Well, we've got a couple of minutes left for our final topic, which actually kind of segues nicely on from what we were just talking about, Ben, because it's rather juxtaposition to my Susie strategy, which, by the way, I'm not doing. I just have one. I had 4 mortgages on SVRs. 3 of them I've completed remortgages on. I've got 1 left on an SVR, and I have sold that one and accepted an offer from a first-time buyer. So that is hopefully going through. And by the way, Ben, just about reaching out, it could be one of your professional advisors you talk to, because this 3rd property that I've just finished the remortgage on, the rent was not sufficient to support even a like-for-like remortgage. So I didn't really bother to look into it, but then I got quite desperate because it was going up every interest rate rise. And my broker said, "Oh, Vanessa, there are a handful of lenders that will use the market rent to calculate the borrowing, not the actual rent that you're receiving." And in this particular property, the tenants had been in there for 5 years, and we had COVID and everything, and I didn't put the rent up. And I was amazed to find actually that my rent had gone from, the local market rent had gone from around 1,200 a month when this tenant moved in. It was now more like 1,750 to 1,800 a month. So my tenant has got a very good deal actually. But this lender, in my case, it was Fleet, they were willing to use the actual market rent, not the rent I was receiving. So that solved my problem, and I was able to remortgage. So, that's just really to say that there could be a solution out there that you weren't aware of. So I do want to encourage everybody to speak to your professional advisors as well, because they may have an answer. So sorry, our final thing was, and it's positive, Ben, because we like to end on a positive note. It was a discussion started by a PT regular member called "The Future is Bright, the Future is Buy to Let." And what prompted him to start this discussion was that I think he's in the Redcar area. He said that that build to rent operators had moved in and were putting up all these shiny new flats with concierge and everything. And he said that they're pushing rents up in the area. and that even if he was only achieving 2/3 of the rent that they were advertising for, he said he would be very, very happy with that. And previously, I think we've discussed, landlords being a bit fearful of build to rent. And I think this is nice to turn that around and see how landlords can ride on the tails of the coattails of a build to rent operator.
I agree with that, Vanessa. I, as you know, used to work in a build to rent setting with big sort of corporate landlords before I took on this mantle. And there is a totally different outlook, raison d'etre, purpose to that type of landlord than there is to our cohort of landlords. I'll leave it at that juncture is all I'm going to say. But when purpose-built student accommodation came in my neck of the woods, it was great because it made my sort of on street accommodation look really affordable. And it's not everybody wants concierge and parcel collection. And I remember planning one site, and the investor was desperate to have an Amazon sort of drone pad that they could deliver parcels and stuff like that. We're at the point where we don't need gimmicks and Indian head massages on a Tuesday afternoon in the common areas. We just need safe and secure and decent accommodation that's priced reasonably. And I think the PRS can do that. We're in a period of flux at the moment, clearly, but that's for all of the reasons that I've articulated, and they can easily be fixed if you deal with confidence and tweaks and taxation levers. But this sort of reliance on, or this viewpoint that build to rent is somehow the panacea to our housing woes is sorely mistaken. I've made this very point to ministers, that not everybody wants this type of accommodation. It's certainly got its place. I'm not dissing it. I'm not saying we shouldn't build those types of things, but the reality is you need plenty more of all types of tenure. That's social housing, private rented, or build to rent. And until we see that, the situation is not going to get any better. But I agree with that gentleman's take on it, and renters, frankly, will prefer dealing with a landlord that they know and get on with for the most part than some faceless bureaucracy that sticks their rent up every 12 months.
Yes, I agree with you. Well, my cat's just popped up actually,
There we go.
because obviously I think also, you mentioned about, I'll let him go down because he'll start meowing. You mentioned about the choice that the private sector landlord provides, and we provide everything from a 5-bed house down to a studio flat, and we're open to things like pets in rental properties and so on. Whereas I think, as you alluded to, the build to rent sector is very corporate. They have stakeholders and shareholders to report to, and they have to do everything much more in a more structured manner, with more protocols and so on, and they'll be far less flexible, in my opinion, than a private sector landlord who has some kind of relationship with the tenant, or who is willing to, as all responsible landlords are, willing to listen if the tenant has an issue or needs assistance with something. We want to work with our tenants, not be this faceless entity. So you're right, we need all housing tenures, but the small private landlord does offer a great deal.
Absolutely. And I think the one thing sorry, breaking my desk here. The one thing I was going to say was that I do think what build to rent do is they package their product much more effectively, and so they are embracing different types of things that will have a broader appeal, like no money up front or zero deposit, warmly welcoming pets, kind of no matter what it is. and a whole range of other things that means that they can charge effectively a premium for. So I mean, I do think there are some things, although I've been slightly dismissive of them. I do think there are some things that we can learn from the buy to let the build to rent sector in terms of enhancing the user experience, and how we can kind of engage tech and things like that to for a more modern feel. But that won't that's not going to appeal to every type of renter that's out there. So I think it also depends on the demographic and cohort that you are going after. Look, there's plenty of the pie to go round. We're in the middle of a housing crisis. It's great that we see different types of investment in the sector. But I noticed that dear old John Lewis couldn't make it stack up a few weeks or so ago, and everybody should be very worried about that. And in some respects, it's a helpful case study of just the predicament we are in, because I don't buy the argument that we should be afraid about making a sustainable profit. That's become a really dirty word, and somehow the commoditization of housing, and how it's viewed by the very far left is that it should almost be rationed, and if you own more than one property, then you're somehow a terrible parasite. Hold on a minute, let's just step back from that ridiculous argument and get a sense of reality here. People are not going to build or acquire homes if it doesn't stack up. No such thing as a free lunch. Simple as that. And the fact that people like the build to rent providers, like John Lewis, are experiencing those same challenges actually makes me feel a little bit better.
Well, Ben, when I do a lot of media as well, as in fact, I was contacted by BBC News this morning about interest rate rises. My stance with it is that the small margin that the private landlord makes is to remunerate them for the risks that they take on when they take on a tenant, and those are typically that the tenant may not pay the rent, or the tenant may damage the property. So every entrepreneur, because in a way landlords are entrepreneurs, because they're taking on the business risk. That is the definition of an entrepreneur. So we're all entrepreneurs in the true sense of the word. We have to have some remuneration for taking on those risks. And Patricia Simmons on the chat has said, and I feel sorry for you, Patricia. She said, I keep quiet about being a landlord because of the bad publicity we get. And she experienced the same career shame when she owned a nursing home. But she says she has always cared greatly for her tenants and her patients and made sure that they were happy. And it's a sad state of affairs where, we're too frightened to put our head above the parapet for being, certainly in the online world as well, being trolled or attacked. I think twice about taking part in media, because I know I can attract some unwanted attention by all of the keyboard warriors out there, and all the activists and the tenant unions and so on. So yes, it's a sad state of affairs. As we know, Ben, the vast majority of landlords are responsible, and that is what the NRLA stands for and what it encourages.
Exactly right. And you are right, Vanessa. Every media appearance, particularly over the weekend when I pointed out that government has kicked landlords from pillar to post for the last decade, so what do people expect? That attracts a whole range of bile from a whole range of people. And it's if you've written to me, folks, on Facebook Messenger, it's one of the reasons I don't check it, because I get sent so much filth, to be honest with you, around the sort of work that we're doing. I'm a big boy. I can deal with it, but actually it's not resolving the substantive issues at hand. And that is one of the frustrating things with all of this. I don't think, people look at us and think, oh, well, they're the alternative message talking up the landlords. I mean, hello, I don't really see us as the alternative message. I see us as a reasonable and rational voice that's proud to represent responsible landlords. And quite frankly, I couldn't give a crap what people throw at me. I will go out and make that same message day in, day out, because I believe in it passionately. And I think it's starting to get through. I do think it's starting to get through. As I say, there is no shame to be had around owning more than one property. The problem is we're now in an incredibly divisive world between the haves and the have-nots, and things like local housing allowance being frozen for the past 3 years is an unacceptable policy that puts the most vulnerable in our society at risk. I'm happy, to call for that change to be made, because it will benefit both landlord and renters, and also it's the right thing to do. But actually what we see is really divisive approaches. Well, we're going to tax landlords more, and we're going to keep renters down over here, and before you know it, you end up in the middle of a culture war. And that's in some respects, when I wake up, sometimes what I feel like we've entered into. Not an alternative voice. We've got a strong argument, and we should be proud about what we do, and we should redouble our efforts to make sure that we support initiatives to rid the sector of those that bring it into disrepute, both from a landlord and a renter side. And I made that point on Channel 5 this morning. I don't know if anybody still watches Channel 5, but I made it anyway, and it's going out at 5 o'clock tonight.
Well done for all your efforts, Ben, because I know you're always on the media trail and you're such a good spokesperson for our sector. You face some very, very challenging questions, which I wouldn't want to face. So, don't go changing. You're doing a wonderful job, in my opinion. And I am a member of the NRLA and have been for a very long time. Christine Gutteridge just wants to say thank you, Vanessa and Ben. Another great webinar, interesting and relevant. So thank you, Christine. That's the aim of what we try and do here. We have run out of time now. We're coming to the end. Sorry if we didn't reach your question, but remember that the NRLA helpline is available to you Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, and also Saturday mornings. And, there's the NRLA forum and property tribes where you can get your questions answered by a community of people, which is healthy because it's a hive mind of people all sharing knowledge and experience. But Ben, let's just sign off with a reminder about the conference.
Oh, yes.
Because we know that Mr. Gove has accepted an invitation to speak, which is very exciting. And it's coming up in it's November, isn't it?
No, 24th of October.
Oh,
in
beg your pardon.
No,
24th
that's
of
right.
October.
It promises to be a really, really good day. We do have an invite in also to Matthew Pennycook of Labour. I'd be very pleased to get another view on the direction of travel, and really what I want to do, Vanessa, is to make sure these the politicians feel able to accept these invitations, but also B, to make sure that members hear it straight from the horse's mouth. And I do hope the Secretary of State will be taking questions. That's a detail to be worked out. I want him to see the great work that's going on in the sector, and I want him to hear firsthand from my members that are doing such a fantastic job in very difficult circumstances. 24th of October, Birmingham. See you there.
Absolutely. And we want everybody to turn out and support the conference and be there in person to show solidarity for the work of the NRLA and responsible landlords across the country. So I'll be there. Ben will be there. Michael Gove might be there. But for now, Ben and I are going to say goodbye. I don't know when we're coming back for our next webinar, Ben, probably in a couple of months' time, or maybe just after the conference.
No,
the year is just flying by, isn't it?
It is flying by. No, we should definitely do one before Christmas. We'll get it in the diary. I can't believe I've said that word now, but yeah, there we go. Look forward to seeing everybody in a couple of months, and keep up the great work.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us, everybody. We're signing off now, and we'll see you next time on the Landlord Lens. But bye for now.